Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to introduce you to my team. I like to call them the Fantastic Four, where we have Leslie Queen, we have Harry Titus, and then we have Ben Novak, and I am Sharice Som. And today we are talking about the case study regarding the insurance company that was located in Africa, where they had three regions where they worked. And when we were considering what we had read about it, one of the things that we identified certainly was that change is the only constant. And so, therefore, we identified several big ideas from the synopsis, and we configured ways that we would be able to address them using creativity and innovation in order to address some of the issues that arose from their experience. When we collectively got together, we thought about several big ideas. One was simply that too much, too fast was happening as it related to the interventions that they were using related to their Focus 2015 project, where they kind of underestimated the time frame needed for effective change to happen. When we think about change, we certainly think about the Lewin change model or change management model, where motivation for change has to be created before change can take place, and certainly making sure that when we identify concepts related to change, we're talking about the unfreeze, then change, and then refreezing, so that we can incorporate some or institutionalize some of the ideas to address change, like being able to celebrate small wins. So when we think about the big ideas, we're talking about the too much, too fast happening. We're also talking about only having an approach where they kind of worked in a silo with upper management, and it was top down and not including the frontline workers who would actually execute the plan. And so with these big ideas, we want to move to Ben, who's going to talk a little bit about Focus 2015 and what that was about.
All right. So with respect to Focus 2015, what happened with 2015 at this particular organization is it consisted of many regional managers, specifically like three regional heads that had a bunch of team leaders and and a specific number of senior customer service relation managers. The whole point of this was to try to increase the value of the actual what they offer, and then also engage with customers. With respect to that, the William and Norton decided to use the just one of their locations to actually down in Cape Town to actually do the pilot the program. And so and the ultimate goal at the end of, I think it was 2015, was to actually see if they could get an actual number, increase their numbers of customer engagement with their products, and also try to offer better products with their current and also customers, as well as try to get the customers to get more customers, you could say, with respect to increase their to increase their customer service and number of customers.
Sweet. So at this time, I want us to just kind of do a deep dive into some of the questions and have a conversation really about kind of this entire sort of concept of what they were trying to work through. And so as we thought through and read the case study, let's talk a little bit about just what are any external or internal factors influenced William and Norton's decision to implement a change initiative like Focus 2015. And so were there any, as you read the case study, were there any internal, external factors that really stuck out to you, that you believe influenced their decision making to implement the change initiative?
Well, on page 59, it talks about down near the bottom how they didn't want the workers to get complacent. So I really felt like that was sort of their internal, like, we've got to change our culture. We want to make sure workers are constantly moving forward. And they felt like they didn't want them to be complacent, was at least one internal factor in it. They also maybe pushed them a little bit too far without them knowing the why. So, but
Yeah.
some internal.
I agree with that one. As I read through, I think that that internal factor, I believe, really drove them wanting to do it so quickly, because we know that you can lose employees, you can slow down productivity. And so I recognize that piece as well. I wonder, as you mentioned, if they pushed them too much because of the fear of, losing employees and losing productivity. And so I definitely think that was a huge internal factor. Anything else, either internal or external?
One thing that I thought about too was that I don't think that they created a compelling message for them to create buy-in from everybody related to, the things that were going on. And although they said that, like when they increased the amount for what they were going to be charging for some existing services, they said it wasn't for money, but, externally, I think it was going to hamper some of the satisfaction that customers had. And, truth of the matter is they were focused on satisfaction and financial gain, but they didn't consider all of the factors.
Mhm.
And I think with respect to the actual company itself, just like I mentioned with the goal of 2015, is I think they were really trying to get more customers, but also just try to maintain at least what they have. And from, I believe in the reading, they actually had increased the amount of customers, and also their engagement with respect to some of the changes they were trying to do with respect to that.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think, as I thought about it too, from the external standpoint too, I think it was on page 57 when I want to say Cherie received the email from the head of retail distribution talking about the customer engagement activity levels being down around 40% compared to their average for the last 3 months, right? That also obviously was pushing them to really look at, all right, what are we doing wrong as we think about engagement with our customers, and how do we build that up while also trying to deal with what was happening internally. And so I think with both of those, we saw a hard push too fast. And so I thought of that as well as we thought through that, which kind of leads me to the next factor of, as we looked at, obviously them wanting to implement change, what was the role of communication during the change initiative? In your opinion, what was that role?
I think that the communication was not inclusive or collaborative, in that it didn't include the folks that were going to actually execute the plan. And again, when we think about innovation and creativity, we are in the process of learning that creativity just kind of happens. Sometimes innovation falls into our laps, and they didn't create the environment for that to happen because everybody wasn't at the table communicating it. And then we also, because of the top-down approach, just communication about progress or lack of progress was not communicated with those that were actually in the trenches doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think, sorry.
Then Kane went ahead and questioned herself as to whether she thought she was being an effective communicator. And, we've learned you can't communicate too much. So if she's questioning that, then there probably were some holes or places for improvement.
Mhm.
And I mean, I think that with respect to the actual communication, I don't think anybody else but just the top individuals said we're going to do this. I know it's a great idea on paper, but unfortunately, it turned out that I don't think they thought everything through with how they were going to do it. So it was almost kind of like on a whim, like, hey, this is what we're going to do. And hope and pray, I guess, is how it sounds like what their initiative was.
Mhm. And I think, you know, that inclusive communication is obviously super important. And when, you know, you don't have the buy-in from everyone through that communication stream, then you're going to run into challenges. And so that, which leads me to the portion on what leadership challenges were experienced during Focus 2015, in your opinion.
I think maybe the culture, like, I remember we learned a code that said like culture eats strategy for breakfast. And, you know, in piggybacking off of what we just talked about related to communication, I think the work environment was communicating something to them that they weren't prepared for or weren't prepared in terms of how to address it, you know, because the culture indicated that, hey, they thought that the catchment area that they were given was too much. And then they certainly didn't want to be monitored as frequently. And so, you know, when we're talking about leadership, part of it is to engage with, you know, the people that you're working with, being able to empathize and put yourself in position and, you know, get the outcome that you want. But basically, that when we talk about leadership, we're talking about relationship. And so I think maybe there is where they struggled a little bit with being in relationship with those that they were supervising and supporting.
Yeah, it was a big challenge, maybe too much, too fast. Didn't really explain the why and maybe everything that went along with it.
Mhm.
And I probably answered the same response to number two, but I mean, it's just, I think, like it mentioned, I think it looked good on paper. I mean, I think that might also go with the same with question two, like we're asking. I mean, it seemed like they didn't have a plan. I mean, they did, but the plan didn't quite work the way they expected it to.
Right. Yeah, and I think as we all know, when you think about leadership and trying to get buy-in, we must ensure that everyone's voice is a part of that plan. And I think that was one of the huge leadership challenges that they were experiencing, is that they just really did not have everyone's voice wasn't included or thought through as they built out the plan. And so with that, what factors influence resistance to change, in your opinion? I think as we look at this case study, but also just in general, what are those factors that really can influence any resistance when we're trying to change things?
I think partly is uncertainty. Lots of times we go back to our default behaviors because we know what to do in certain situations. We're accustomed to doing things. And I think part of the resistance might be that it was new information that was coming upon them quickly with unclear expectations. And so that might lead to worrying about job performance and other things which affect the culture. And so I think, you know, part of the resistance is having the unknown and how to operate in the unknown.
Yeah.
I guess another thing that I can think of with what resistance, why they got resistance is because I know that a lot of I think it was the relationship consultants, they actually were, I guess, getting watched, and I guess a lot of them were thinking, well, we're doing our job. But I guess to piggyback off what Cherie said is that they maybe were still just doing the new or the old instead of the new. So I mean, that's kind of how I think maybe some people resist changes. Are like, well, I mean, are you going to watch everything I do, all the time, or when will they start feeling comfortable that they're not being watched all the time by the leaders?
Yeah, I think that really hits that part on the head as far as when we think about those resistance. Leslie, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that or kind of dive right into which change model would have been preferable to use to drive the success of Focus 2015. I know that we mentioned change management model already, but does anyone want to kind of add any additional pieces to that?
I think the one we discussed most was Lewin, the unfreeze, change, and refreeze. How in the unfreeze part, maybe they should have tried to battle that complacent culture, just that status quo is good. And then in the change part, identify barriers, where things might kind of derail, if possible, look for improvements, tell why, just really try to create that new sense of culture. And then the refreeze part is going to be, the upkeep, constant communication. Are we clear on expectations? Some check-ins, looking at data, lots of things going on in the refreeze part. So,
yeah, I agree, and I think too that and just something I would add to the unfreeze part too, as they're kind of trying to evaluate, like realizing that the goal is not to be innovative, but to figure out all the other things around it that you can do, that you can improve to then create innovation, right? And so the innovation will come from all the other things. And so I think with Focus 2015, a lot of times they focus so much on what can we do to be innovative instead of how do we change all the things around our organization to create innovation. And so I think doing that evaluation or that initial freeze piece, really being able to kind of evaluate that as well, I think would be very helpful, would be preferable, in my opinion, to drive out Focus 2015.
So as kind of we close, some of those things they could do then would be to create those diverse work teams, to definitely include the frontline workers, not neglect their thoughts and opinions of how this is really going to play out. Creating that better work environment. Maybe they need times of togetherness, times of working apart. Maybe they need changes in environment or different things like that. Probably a better communication system might help them as well. Being able to then explain that why to them, more frequent check-ins, solid ways to look at data, evaluate, analyze the data, and then make changes based on the data. So we feel like, I think we've all said they're kind of on the right track. If they would just do a few things here and there, maybe they would not have run into this problem. But any last thoughts from anyone else?
Only thing that I just kind of thought of when you were speaking, Leslie, was just that we talked about Lewin's change management theory, but breaking down the existing like status quo, the things that they already knew. I think that might have been helpful because it made me think of like the stages of change where you start with pre-contemplation, where there's supposed to be a certain level of awareness. And I think that maybe if everybody was aware, then, some of their efforts may not have been as unsuccessful initially.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.